Hey, Tom here likes the math and history, and we are going to take a look at efficient decisions for quadratics. So we've been learning a lot of strategies when solving the quadratic trinomials. We have the square rooting system, factoring it. The most famous one is the quadratic formula, and completing the square. But there's a fifth one that's not on here, and that is graphing, because a lot of the times when you're doing an exam for school or a math test or any kind of assignment, sometimes your math teacher will not give you any graph paper, or sometimes graphing isn't always the best decision. So we're going to be using some common sense, what kind of most efficient strategy we will use for certain scenarios. So let's get started. So we have 2x squared equals 72. So we've been learning that a quadratic trinomial is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. That is known as a quadratic standard form. Not only that, what kind of method would you think would work for solving this quadratic trinomial? Well, in this case scenario, it's a quadratic binomial because there are two objects on the field. There is a system we can use that can help us understand what system we need to use to be the most efficient. Because we don't want to solve this kind of equation and spend like 6.5 hours doing it and getting to our answer. Being efficient means getting it done quickly and getting it done easily.
6.5 hours later. A few inches later.
So, we start at the top of the spectrum. Does your b value equal 0? If yes, then you would use square roots. If no, then you would move on to the next question. Is it factorable? If yes, then you use the factoring system. If no, then you move on to another one. Does your a value equal 1? If yes, then you would use completing the square. If no, then you would use the old quadratic formula. So let's get started. Does b equal 0? Well, in this case scenario, we don't have a b variable. B does equal to 0. So in this case, we can use square rooting. Square rooting it is the best scenario for this kind of problem. Let's move on to another one. What happens if we have our a value as 9x squared plus 2x plus 1? That is a quadratic trinomial. Let's get started. Does b equal 0? Here is our b value, 2x. Well, if it's 2x, it's not gonna be equal to 0. 2 does not equal to 0. No way! So we move on to the next one. Is it factorable? In this case scenario, if you divide everything by 9, it wouldn't work out well because then you would have fractions. So not only that, if you use the diamond method, and if you put 9 on the top, because you have to do 9 times 1, and put 2 on the bottom, what two numbers can multiply to 9 and 2? Well, 3 and 3 are the only numbers that can multiply to 9, but not add up to 2. So factoring does not work either. Does our a value equal 1? Our a value is right here, but it equals to 9, not 1. So completing a square is not an option. In this case scenario, we have to use the quadratic formula to try and figure it out. So that is this one. Let's move on to the next scenario. So what happens if we have x squared plus 7x plus 10? Let's get started. So does b equal 0? In this case, b is actually equal to 7, not 0. So does 7 equal 0? No. So square rooting is not an option. Next question. Is it factorable? Wait a minute. If we try and use the diamond problem on this, what two numbers can multiply up to 10 and add up to 7? Well, 5 and 2 go into 7 and multiply to 10. And when we do that, we are going to get two new binomials as x plus 5 parentheses and x plus 2 parentheses equal 0. Because we're going to be using the 0 property in that one. So that is factoring. So can it be factored? Yes. And when we factor it and solve what x is, we get to solve the problem. Here is the last scenario. We have x squared plus 9x plus 15. So let's get started. Does b equal to 0? b is 9 right here. So our b value is 9. So no. Is it factorable? If we put 15 on the top and 9 on the bottom, the only numbers are 1 and 15 or 3 and 5. No, this will not work either. So factoring is not an option. Does a equal 1? Wait. If we have an x squared at the beginning, we have an imaginary 1 right here. So our a does equal 1. That means that this one is the most fit for solving with completing the square. And that is all the scenarios that can happen when you try to learning how to be efficient and deciding which efficient method would be the most easiest and most simplest to solve. So always start at the top and work your way to the bottom. When you get to one of these four, stop and start solving the problem. So I hope this video has helped you. Thank you for watching Taoping Life's Math Industry. Like and subscribe. And to end the video, let's see what happens to Henry Stickmin.
Eh? How did we lose one? I think we should throw it in the back, just to be safe.
You ever wonder why there's a bank out here? Well, I think it's supposed to be like more of a vault, you know? Oh, that makes sense.
Freeze! Don't move!